Okay, now go.
Now go? Okay, good evening. Welcome. I'm in. Welcome to the Smurfit-Stone Community Advisory Group meeting October 2nd. The CAG mission statement is to serve as a trusted liaison between the community, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality by becoming informed, sharing this information with the public, and engaging in the Superfund process to ensure the restoration of the former Smurfit-Stone mill site to a healthy ecological state for future generations. Excuse me. Okay, so our agenda. The copy of the agenda?
It is.
Oh, we do. Okay, right there. All right, so on September 24th, Congressman Zinke was on site at Smurfit-Stone, along with Matt Zacharias, who is Congressman Zinke's new field representative and veteran liaison. Steve Houck was there. He's the district director. Garrett Brown was there. He's Congressman Zinke's press secretary. And from EPA, Mackenzie Beaker was there. Carolina Blue, and I'm not going to say his name correctly, but Aaron Uridalis from Region 8, Denver, was there. From DEQ, Katie Garson-Forba was there. The site owner, Steve Malsom, was there with his caretaker, Tom Peterson. Brian Chiefin was there from Chapin.
Yeah.
Clark Fork Coalition, Missoula County Water Quality District Travis Ross was there, and from CSKT Chris Stark was there. I was there. Clayton Elliott from Trout Unlimited, who is their Conservation and Government Affairs Director, was there. We spent the first few minutes with introductions, talking about who you are, what you're there for, and then Allie gave EP's perspective on the site and the contaminants and sampling, etc. And there was just some kind of back and forth conversation. What else, Brian? What else? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own personal opinions about the conversation, but
As I do.
Yeah.
As I do.
Yeah, I don't think there's much else. It was a real quick visit. Wow.
It was a really quick visit,
Yeah.
and we were in different vehicles. So the first part, when we went down, when we drove, we met at the guard shack, and that's where we grouped off into different vehicles and went, and then we got in different vehicles. So when we went down, I was in the same vehicle as Tom Peterson, who's been Steve Melsom's caretaker for many, many years, and Katie and I, and we had an opportunity to talk to Steve, which I think was really helpful. And then when we got in different vehicles, Steve Houck, who's the district representative, was in the same car as I and Katie and Steve. So it was very quick. He had, I want to say it was about a 35-minute visit about that.
Yeah, that's right.
And then left. There was some sidebar conversations that went on, and I had a very constructive conversation with Aaron from EPA, and then some follow-up emails after that with Aaron that I think were really helpful. And, they were really good. So, sort of led to a conversation that I think we've the admin team has been having regarding about moving forward and really focusing on the things that we can agree on and how we can move forward positively with those things that we can agree on. certainly not negating the things that we don't agree on, but really saying what can we agree on. And I think that there's been, over the past 9 years that I've been involved in this, so much disagreement. And I don't think that there will ever be total agreement, but I think that it would be helpful to talk about what we agree on. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Sorry, I was going to try and join the Zoom here from my computer because I wanted to put some stuff up on the board, but actually it's acting really slow, so I'll go from here.
Do you have the password for here?
Okay, great. Yeah, it's all right. We'll be okay. Yeah, I'll pull up, I'll read it, and then if people want to see it online, we can pull it up.
Okay.
Can I just say one more thing about
The visit?
The visit?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course you can.
Can we do one thing? So Jerry asked me to facilitate a conversation tonight. And in my name is Brian Chaffin. I'm the executive director of the Collectible Coalition. But prior to that, I was a professor at the University of Montana for about 10 years. And one of my roles at the University of Montana was facilitating conversations around natural resource conflict. Broadly, but also really natural resource collaboration, places where stakeholders of all types and all interests came together for the benefit of each other, community, the resource, and sustainability, just moving forward together. So it's something that I have some training in. Interestingly enough, early on in the KEG process, I was looking back at my notes trying to find the notes from this moment, but it was 2016 that I actually came at the request of Jen Harrington, who at the time was studying with me for her master's degree. I came in and facilitated some early meetings where the conversation was about like, how do we form a group? What's our governance structure look like? Do we need decision making? Like who's on it? Like what does this look like? And what do we need to do to get to the mission statement that you so eloquently read earlier? So anyway, so I have some history and knowledge there, and now I'm the executive director of Collectible Coalition, so I wear that hat as well. And I'm going to try to take that hat and just kind of put it to the side a little bit today. I can never really truly take it off, but put that to the side today so that I can hear you and we can just get some things out on the table that will help this group move forward productively with the EPA, with the potential responsible parties, with everybody interested in this site, and the county, and everybody. I don't want to name everybody, the tribes, that they would be all named. So anyway, but first, to do that, I think something's really important is like, who's in the room? I know we do this every time, but let's do a round of introductions really quick. Who you are, and you can say anything more than that if you want to. Who you are, who you represent, if you represent someone. Let's start up at the head there.
Good. I'm Brianna Pabst. I'm the DEQ project manager for the Smurfit-Stone.
I'm Don Power. I work with Haley and Aldrich, and we're supporting DEQ.
Sam Carlson, staff scientist with the Collectible Coalition.
Jerry Dallas, KEG admin team and Frenchtown resident for a really long time.
I'm Don Latham, a resident and the official curmudgeon.
I'm David Schmetterling with Montana Fish and Wildlife and Parks.
I'm Courtney Rosenberg, grad student at the university and here with Montford.
My name is David Westner. I moved back after working in construction career for 50 years, and I'm interested in quality resolution of the Smurfit-Stone site. Washington for 23 years, so I'm familiar with that type of operation. And I have some concerns about how we got to where we're at. Because if we're doing our due diligence all these decades, we shouldn't be where we're at.
Elena Evans, Missoula Valley Water Quality District. I was trying not to be the only person on the owl. I don't think I can figure out how to move it to the middle of the room though, which would make it easier for everyone to see, but we don't have a long enough cord. But that's what I was going for with this table.
I'm Jordan Hulla. I'm with Missoula County Planning, Development, and Sustainability.
I'm Sam Berkelhammer. I work for GSI Environmental. Just here to take notes.
I'm Bruce Sims, Kootenai resident and note taker.
And part of the
CAG administrative team, Jerry and I, and Jennifer, Rich, yeah.
Harrington.
Eric.
I'm Bunny Sims. I'm also a note taker and Houston resident.
Thanks, Bunny. Let's introduce folks online. I can't see everybody.
I can't see.
Rachel's on.
Can we do the view, change the view here so we can see
You can do
everybody?
whatever you want. And anybody who wants to be IT can do it too.
Let's
You're doing a
do.
fantastic job.
That's right.
Oh yeah, Elena, you're crushing. Okay, Brian, why don't you go?
Hi, Brian Barkarak, Natural Resource Damage Program.
Oh, we can't. Is that us?
Yeah.
Hold on, Brian.
On the bottom.
Yep. Oh yeah. Got you. Let's see it. Hold on, Brian. Oh, this one, eh?
Bottom left. It has an X on
Just
it.
click the microphone.
mic-
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Okay, Brian, try it again.
Brian Barkarak, Natural Resource Damage Program.
Thanks, Brian. We can hear you now.
Good. Hey, I could just add, I think it came up on the tour, but we provided all the data to EPA's team looking at the fish tissue data after, I think Aaron talked about it in the meeting last week, and I got everything from Trevor and David and sent it over earlier this week.
Cool. After we do intros, I'll introduce that idea here in a second. How about Catherine LaCours? Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
You did very well, thank you. Catherine LaCour, I work with EA Engineering, Science and Technology, and we're the contractor support for EPA.
Thanks, Catherine. Laura.
Laura Lundquist, Missoula Current reporter. Thank you.
Awesome. Vicky.
Vicki Watson, local scientist, been watching the pulp mill drama for over 40 years.
Thanks, Vicky. Chris.
Chris Stark, I'm the staff scientist for the CSKT legal department.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I don't imagine MCAT wants to introduce themselves, but
They don't.
yeah, I figured not. Perfect. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
There's a second.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. I didn't get everybody. See, it takes many people to run the IT. Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Michelle McGree, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in Helena. I'm the Fish Habitat Bureau Chief.
Thanks, Michelle. Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Rachel Parthasarthi from GSI.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, did I get everybody? Awesome. Folks online, while we're having this conversation, it is tough. It is tough to facilitate a conversation both in person and on Zoom. So please just type in the chat if you want to say something. Raise your hand, and we'll recognize you and have you chat, and we'll get to you when we do. Thanks for being here. Okay. Something I want to address before we get started with this conversation. I want to address something Brian said and let others that were there weigh in as well. At the tour, one of the things, so as Jerry said, we drove out to the river. We're all kind of sitting in a circle. Standing in a circle. Everybody got to introduce themselves and give a little spiel about what their, I don't know if we want to call it, what their interest was in this site at the end, in the end game here, to tell the congressman kind of what was going on. And PCBs were brought up, right? And the fish tissue sampling was brought up, and the PCBs in the fish. Dioxin and furans weren't really brought up until the end. It was kind of skimmed over a little bit. But the APA said, Allie said, and Aaron said both immediately that it's really hard to draw conclusions. The PCBs are in fish in this river from this site. And so the EPA doesn't want to use their resources from this site to do that type of analysis. And so Aaron Urialis, if you will,
Thank you.
I don't know if that's right or not, is that right? Great. From the region, who is the director of Superfund and emergency management for the region, so right under the administrator, Salish Western, said that he was personally
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. When PCBs are a product of the industry, and we don't know the source, but we do know that there's a high concentration in fish, and this is an industry that's been located on the river for 60 years, and yeah, so I'm glad to see the EPA is devoting resources to that. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thanks, David. There's a question. Let me ask Brian really quick. Brian, do you have anything to add to that? That's what Brian was talking about when he said he got the state data to the EPA as requested.
No, that's it. I think we just heard the message that EPA is the same thing you said, Brian, investing the resources to try to determine if it's what the source is, and if it's not Smurfit, then where might they be coming from? And it's not only, in my understanding, it's not only the state data, but it's the data collected from EPA in 18 and 19, and then the data collected by FWP under the Columbia Basin's Toxin Grant.
The fish tissue data from the toxins grant is still with the DEQ, as far as I know, but the passive sampler data, yep. And Brian was referring to the fish tissue data from 2018 and 2019. So, yeah.
Your question?
See, and the concern I have, not knowing a lot of that information, is I hear that there was a large release from up at the Bonner Mill when a dam was breached. Yeah. So how could stuff from that impact stuff downstream? And that, I mean, we've got two major industries that could have impacted the quality of life in the river and that. And point of one, and I haven't heard any discussion about that, so that concerns me, is we're getting a real zoom in on one, and we're not getting the overall perspective, and that's concerning.
What I'm happy to hear is that the EPA is actually going to try to answer the questions we've had for a long time. Instead of saying, oh, we're just narrowing in on Smurfit, they're taking the data that we got from the bigger swath to actually look at whether or not Smurfit is contributing, because for so many years they were unwilling to look at it. But now we actually do have PCB data, which we didn't have before, which is a good outcome of additional sampling, regardless of whether it adds to the risk, because it can help us answer this question.
And I think that was really positive. That was one of the things that I felt was really positive about the meeting, was that Chris Stark was there. And Chris jumped in too, because he did ask. Congressman Zinke really talked about the river. And it was really cool that the river was such a huge topic of concern and conversation. And it was perfect timing for Aaron to jump in and say, we're looking at it differently now. Or I don't know if they're looking at it differently, but just, it was refreshing to hear that it was broader. And to me, that was really positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And just, I'm going to get a question here. I'm just going to state what Elena said in a different way, as well as like, it's great because they're going to look at all sources up and down the river, right? And so Smurfit may be one of them. Hopefully they'll answer that question. Maybe we answer the question that there's others, and they could never have done that with the resources on this site alone. So to invest additional federal resources into this is a real positive.
And one more, just to add to that, there certainly there's a lot of sources of toxins in the environment, and also with industries up and down the river. And that's some of what the passive sampling we did at a larger scale showed. Some of the places we thought were controls, like the bitters or the Blackfoot, showed high levels of toxins. We also saw it kind of cleaning up as it came downstream. But going to your point about Milltown Dam, which I assume you were talking about, there's also Bonner Dam, which was also removed on the Blackfoot River. But Milltown Dam, when that was removed, the difference with this site is, that when we've been investigating contaminants in the environment and toxins in fish, we're targeting not the pervasive, what do you call it, effects of, a century of hard rock mining, copper, cadmium, lead, zinc, and mercury. We know those are in the river, but we're looking at constituents that are associated with the pulp and paper process. So that's because we're investigating this site. That's what we were trying to look for.
Thanks, Dave. Chris, did you want to add anything? I noticed you were off mute there for a sec.
I think I'm still off mute, yes?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. No, I don't have much to add, although I think this is the tip of the iceberg concerning the tribe's rights and our traditional homelands. My take on this is that there's a lot more that we can go back, and I sent some of that stuff to you today, Brian, regarding other things that the site has decided to just skip over. And that's not acceptable to the tribes. And that's why I was asking those rather pointed questions to the sinking staff, because we need to get this going, and the game that's been played to date is not making the tribes very comfortable. And so this is a positive outcome. I just hope it's real.
And I would love to see them think about not only just background contaminants, but also the mixing models associated with the different volumes of water coming in. But I want to give credit where credit is due to the EPA for actually answering the questions that we asked, because I would love them to continue to do that on a broad swath of questions that we've asked.
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate it. Cool. Any other questions on that particular piece? Oh, sorry.
I appreciate the broadening of the scope, because if we go back in history, there are a lot of activities that were on the rivers that could have contributed to a lot of stuff we have today that have nothing to do with our current industry, because we don't have all the industry that we have had with the lumber industry and manufacturing and that, because a lot of it's broken down. Well, some of the processes that were done, mine is one of them. What sort of controls do we have back then? We didn't know.
I just wanted to share that ENST classroom 410, oh no, now they quit, never mind. Someone else had joined the meeting and I was trying to make sure we all knew.
Oh, yeah, great. All right, thanks, Lynn.
I have a question for Dave. When you're looking at the fish species samples, and you're talking about trying to look for specific markers, we could call them, for the processing that may have been done at Smurfit, are you looking for the specific congeners that are associated, like the dioxin specifically that's associated?
Yeah, we haven't done any fingerprinting, if that's what you're asking, to describe it to the site. But on the other hand, we haven't really, this work hasn't really been in conjunction with the EPA in a lot of ways in terms of determining what's on site and then looking for that, elsewhere. A lot of the sampling that's occurred hasn't been concerted. Again, we're trying to figure out, in 2000, the milk was in 2010, I think it was in 2012 that we first collected fish with the intent of not looking just for heavy metals, which we already have a consumption advisory on most of the Clark Fork River for heavy metals owing to the history of hard rock mining. We've never really explored the effects of the paper mill. And at that time, it was being viewed that the site was clean. There was no effects on the river or the fish. And we did some preliminary sampling just to see if that was true, because we never explored that. All the sampling that had been done had been for copper, cadmium, lead, zinc, and mercury, And we had, like I said, consumption advisories to reflect that. And in that sampling, we uncovered PCBs, toxins, and furans that maybe mercury, I can't remember, we did mercury that year too, but that raised the concern for fish consumption. And since that time, we've had a consumption advisory on fish downstream of the mill, just because that's the only place at that time we sampled for those constituents. And then since then, we've been trying to figure out, the source, and there's been a lot of confusion of, whether, like I said, there's a lot of sources for those things in the environment. I mean, whether it's forest fires, whether it's a post and pole place upstream somewhere. But I wish these are knowable things. They're not unknowable. It's very expensive to test. And it's been very challenging and this is one of the challenges, that we've been facing is to adequately characterize not just the site, but downstream and figure out the source of these contaminants, because in the end, it doesn't matter to us what the source is. I mean, we have a responsibility to inform the public about what's, safe to eat and why and things. And then ultimately, yeah, we would like to, if there is a source, we want to clean that up.
Jen Harrington joined the meeting.
Nice. Jen, would you introduce yourself to the small group here?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jen Harrington. I'm part of the admin team. Been part of the KEG for a long time, and really glad that that we're meeting regardless of the shutdown. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, let's move on from that toxics piece. That's an important piece of conversation and a challenge, as David mentioned, moving forward. So Jerry asked me to facilitate this conversation, and the big topic that she brought was, what do we agree on? And I stepped back a little bit, and I was like, this could go in a lot of different directions. And I was actually really struggled with this over the last couple of days, trying to figure out where to start. And I think the first question to answer is, why do we need a conversation to figure out what we agree on? And I think that it was very apparent to me. I'm going to tell you a little anecdote about the meeting with Congressman Zinke. It was apparent to me that we needed a conversation about what we agree on, because something is definitely not working. In that, at the end, when the congressman left, and we were there with the same players that we had talked to in this meeting all the time, with the exception of Steve Maxwell, who I had never met before, the owner of the site. We had the EPA, we had Representative DQ, Tribes, Clarkville Coalition, Tribe Unlimited, the KEG, and Steve, and I hope
Missoula County.
And Missoula County Tribes, sorry. And it kind of came out in our conversation, who invited Brian? Who invited the congressman? How did he get here? Why is it on his radar? And EPA, I don't want to throw them on the bus, but I'm going to. They pointed the finger at me, and they're like, "You did this." And I said, "For you," right? And I said, "No, I actually didn't do this. I did not. I am not trying to antagonize you by bringing Brian there." And they're like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we did invite him," and so it might just have been on his radar. That's totally okay. But the fact that we all immediately went into our bunkers and said, who's trying to push this in a different direction and why, I think is telling of that something is not working. And so that, I might be wrong about that, but that's kind of the place where I want to start this conversation. And one of the things I did was I went back into kind of my files when I first did these, or facilitated conversation. I looked at what a KEG was, right? What a KEG was, and the definition's changed, and the documentation on the EPA website has changed quite a bit since the 2016. gone through a couple iterations. But to start our discussion of kind of what we agree on, and I'll just tell you my outline today. I think that the things that I think we should talk about are not the detailed in the weeds things, but are what are each of us and our individual groups that we're here representing want to see as an outcome? Like what's the pie in the sky end result outcome that you want to see on Smurfit? Because I don't know that everybody's on the same page there, right? So we start there. Then we back up and say, well, what's the timeline that's in your mind? What's the timeline that and maybe there isn't one in your mind because you know how long and how windy Superfund can be. But I don't think everybody shares that. I think there are people that have different timelines than other people do. And then the next one that we might be able to get into is what the process looks like. And then the last thing is, it circles back to the first is what is a keg, is what can we realistically expect the keg to do in effect? And are you as a community advisory group doing that together? Now, everybody in the room is from somewhere different. We have DEQ, we have the county, we have the tribes, we have FWP. You all have different levers to pull, and you're going to pull those levers regardless of what happens in this room. So what is NRDP? I missed that. What is the KEG's role as a liaison between the community, and are we doing that, right? And so I think that's a great place to start. So I'm just going to read this, and yeah, I'm just going to read this. Community Advisory Group is made up of representatives of diverse community interests. A KEG is designed to serve as a focal point for the exchange of information among local community and EPA, state regulatory agencies, and other pertinent federal agencies involved in cleanup of a Superfund site. Its purpose is to provide a public forum for community members to present and discuss their needs and concerns related to the Superfund decision-making process. A KEG can assist EPA in making better decisions on how to clean up a site. It offers EPA a unique opportunity to hear and seriously consider preferences for site cleanup and remediation. However, the existence of a KEG does not eliminate the need for the agency to keep the community informed about plans and decisions throughout the Superfund process, right? So my read of that is that this organization is an important voice to the community and voice back to the EPA, which I think you've all done, right? But getting mired in the fact that we may not, I think it's important to recognize that we may not have the final say in anything, right? And I don't know if we agree on that or not. So that was one of the points I wanted to chat about. And the other one is that it doesn't eliminate the need for the agency to do their own community outreach, right? We are just one piece of that puzzle. So, okay, let's start there. Any thoughts on this group? What is a KEG? Are we doing what a KEG should be doing? We feel good about that? The answer might be yes. I don't know.
I would say yes. I think I'm proud of the work we've done, and I think it's been extremely collaborative, and I don't think we've ever wavered. I think we have really been extremely diligent in holding the agency accountable, which is what our mission statement says that we're going to do. I think that, Jen and I had a conversation with Montford a month or so ago about getting them engaged in helping us with communication, because I think we need it. And so finding ways to branch out into the community has been challenging, but I also think that it's a form of the KEG. And I am proud of the work that we've done. I think that we've commented on 11 different, what do you call it?
The work plans or
Vera addendum. Yeah, I mean, the human health risk assessment, the baseline ecological risk assessment, we commented on 11 of those. And it's not an easy task. And we've done it collaboratively. And we've worked together, I think, exceptionally well. And I'm really, really, very proud of that.
Thanks, Jerry. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I'll say a few things. I think that we have helped initiate some additional sampling that otherwise probably wouldn't have been done. whether it's sufficient or not, that's still in question. I would argue that the formal comment routes had nothing to do with CAG, and so our input wasn't formal, it was kind of informal. The formal routes were the EPA responds with, and there's no formal mechanism for CAG to really enter information into the system, and I think that's probably a design flaw in the process right now. Just my thoughts.
Thanks. Go ahead.
See, and being very new to this, it's important to me that we gather information, and the objective is not to point a finger, but it's for remediation, so we do an efficient, effective job of investing time and resources in getting the problem addressed. And so many times, people are protective so they don't get caught. And that's not the goal. The goal is to get it remediated and done, in my opinion.
Cool. Anybody else want to share?
I'm sorry. This is Catherine LaCour on the phone. Can I ask who just spoke? Who's over in the corner next to Elena?
My name is Dave Glessner.
Thank you.
Anybody online want to say anything about the CAG?
I will say that I think it's really important, particularly in this really drawn out process, full of complex acronyms and descriptions about how information will be assessed, that there's trusted members of the community who are able to talk with folks in a way that resonates with them while also honoring, the location and the history that folks have here, having worked there, having personal experience with potential contaminants and things like that. I mean, we've had meetings here where people hand drew documents of where all of the different chemicals and waste streams went and things like that. So I do think that this is also a great place to gather and build a knowledge base upon which the community can ascertain what's important in the cleanup and hopefully also restoration.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The thing that I'll add to that is that I just think we should stop and recognize the volunteer hours. Right? Like I mean, it's 9 years. Bruce, Bunny, Jen, Jerry, others, even the folks that are paid to do this, that do this in their evenings, right? We should just all collectively recognize that. It's really important. There's a lot of volunteer hours that go into this, and obviously, based on these comments, it's not for naught. It's for positive. So that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For the journey.
Well, this is good. This is what I hoped and expected to come out.
Brian's raising his hand.
Mr. Barkowiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chaffin. I want to go back to two things that you said. I didn't write it down, but when you started off this discussion, where you read the description of the CAG, it was something about how the CAG can help assist EPA in the cleanup of the site, and I'm obviously paraphrasing. In addition to the volunteer hours that Brian just talked about, I think this group this is one of the most involved CAG groups I've ever worked with. And I think they can be a real benefit to the agencies in helping with the cleanup. And so again, commending you guys for all the time that you put in, especially all the volunteer time, and how well engaged you are into this site.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. Jack, we see that you have your hand up.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I joined in just a few minutes ago. Sorry, I couldn't be here earlier. I was in class, but anyways, I'm from Montpurg, and I recently did meet over Zoom with some of the CAG leaders, and essentially our role at Montpurg, we were just sort of wondering what exactly we can do to spread the message about Smurfit-Stone to a broader audience in the community. Right now, I have been working on some posters that could be distributed in the Frenchtown Senior Center, as well as a few that we can distribute in fly shops in the Missoula and Frenchtown area, as well as distributing them on campus. But essentially what we're trying to do here with Montpurg is work with this CAG to send out the appropriate message in order to let people know what the situation is and what our goals and objectives are. Another thing we're talking about is the creation of a newsletter, and I'm sorry if it was brought up already in this meeting and I wasn't there for it, but we're talking about the creation of a newsletter to get the word out. And I guess one of the main things we've been wondering here at Montpurg is how much exactly we're supposed to work directly based off of the CAG's messaging, as opposed to, I guess we're just wondering how much involvement the CAG wants to have in this process, because, that's pretty much just what we're wondering. I know I'm not phrasing it quite right, but yeah, here at Montpurg, we're pretty much just devoted to getting the message out more to students and other people in the community in Missoula and Frenchtown.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. I'm sitting here with Jerry, one of the CAG admin team leaders here, and great points. What we're going to do is table that a little bit to the end of this meeting, where we'll have some more deliverables. And then Jerry said that she'll reach out, and we're going to do a presentation and really involve you and that communication process at a later meeting, more in depth. Get that right, Jerry?
And Courtney's.
And Courtney? Courtney's in the room too.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jack.
I was planning on, we've been working on a proposal, and we have it written up about how we can co-facilitate that student outreach and education. And I will meet with Jerry after this meeting and kind of update you with our next meeting with board and everything. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Chris, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, sir. Jack, one big point that you can help the public with is get a better expansion of fish advisory consumptions, or fish consumption advisories. That is not reaching the public very well, and it really, really is an important piece for this. Folks in that room actually have lots of great details. Fish and Wildlife Parks did a wonderful job of collecting the data. Regarding the CAG itself, the part I find the most value in is local folks actually know what happened. Many boards that I've been on in a different state, this is where all the rubber meets the road, is when you talk to local folks, and then the scientists can go, oh, that's what we're looking at. That is very helpful, because the scientist group is pretty small, and all the public input you can give us, and CAG's a great example of that. Jerry's history of the Smurfit site is, to me, a fairly big unknown prior to her giving that education. So hats off to the CAG and their extensive help.
So
Thanks,
just so a little bit more information about the fish consumption advisory and about the CAG itself. That's good. The posters I've been coming up with have been promoting the CAG meetings, the monthly CAG meetings. And we haven't distributed any of them yet, but there are a few drafts I've come up with. And yeah, I wholeheartedly agree about the fish consumption advisory, because that is a serious threat to public health. And as a pretty avid fisherman myself, it's important that people know these kinds of things. So one of the main ideas I had was distributing more materials to fly shops and guiding groups within the Missoula and Frenchtown area, since that's where fishermen go. And that's just one of the ideas that I had. But yes, that's very much something that we're invested in here at Montpurg.
Cool, thanks, Jack. We'll circle back to that. Okay, Any last comments on the keg? I think this was really productive, and it feels like that there's a pretty solid agreement here. But I don't want to silence anyone that has a disagreement.
I have one, not a disagreement, but just a point that it is extremely difficult. The Superfund process is so long, it's extremely difficult to attract and retain public interest throughout. And I'm not saying that in the context of the CAG's doing a good job or a bad job at that. I just think we need to continue to be strategic about, the monthly meetings are one thing, but are there other forms? There's, from a community member perspective, there's a lot of monthly meetings in between now and when something happens, and that's really where people are. Yeah, I'm telling you, yeah. I don't have any magical solutions for that, but I think we should continue to strategize about, in addition to the normal CAG meetings, getting other information out, having, other events to sort of attract attention to any milestone in the process, because it's hard. I mean, people are busy, they have limited attention when they come to these meetings, and we're arguing about methods for, detecting dioxin in groundwater, and they realize we're 8 years out from doing anything, they're not going to keep coming to the meetings.
You see that? It's been difficult to retain people because people's natural, normal instinct when you have somebody proposal, the first thing they do is they go to the back page. And I think that this is really the same type of thing, is that they don't want to read the 80,000 pages of data that they don't understand. What is it? What do we got here? What do we agree on? And that's,
One of the things I'm doing here, and I just want you to know, is I'm making lists. I'm making, obviously, and as if I was a facilitator worth their salt, I'd have huge pieces of paper up and we'd be writing it down. You can all see it. But I'll feed it back to you via the notes that Bruce and Bunny will send out. One of the things I'm writing is the needs, or things that, it's not that we don't agree on them, but things that we can go back to. So that just what I wrote down was communication. What does it look like? We've got partners in the room that are going to do it. What does it look like? What more do we need to collect from this group to know what goes out there? The next thing I wrote down was strategize on logistics meetings. Maybe it's that one group in this room takes a monthly meeting, and Elena doesn't have to facilitate IT, and Jerry doesn't have to speak in open meeting, and we can round robin this a little bit to share the load. There's some ideas there, right? So I put communication, I put strategize on meetings. Maybe we do a traveling meeting. There's some people downstream that are really hungry to know about this.
They are.
When we took the berm study on the road in Mineral County, people came out of the woodwork to see that because of the downstream impact. So there's some things we can do. I'm going to put that on. I'm going to table that. Put that in the parking lot. I want to move on. Quick.
Well, one of the difficulties we have is what's actually and what's perceived. In my years at the mill at Wallula, people saw coming off of the boil, the steam. Oh man, it blew terrible. Well, there's actually very little pollution in that stack, and it's monitored extremely detailed. Yeah. And so when we present stuff to people, we need to try to make sure it's actual factual so that they don't have a perception.
I appreciate that.
I think consistency is really important, and I think that we, as a CAG, have struggled with that.
I would argue back and say that it hasn't been made easy for you.
It has not. Yeah, it has not. Thank you. That's really fair.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it my turn as curmudgeon?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. The ratio of people who are not of the community to community members is 3 to 1, roughly by my count. The other thing is that by actuarial tables, I will be dead before this process is finished. And that's kind of something that I think about once in a while. That's why I don't come to very many meetings, because I have kind of a get her done kind of approach. And we pretty much know what has to be done right now. So by the time you get through with the process, I can have a small thing about process. If I go out here and I put a pentagram on the thing in chalk, and I put a candle at each point, and I write the proper names of all the devils on the inside, and I stand in there, and I make my invocation to the devil, and he doesn't show up. I think there's something wrong with the process, when the truth is, the devil doesn't show up in that form. There's different forms for the devil. But the process gets all the attention, and the goal seems to get lost, right? And this is why the point made, quite well made, is that people lose interest. And why should they care? The fight seems to be who can extract the most out of the site before it becomes a site for whatever it's going to be, whether it's houses or another sewer plant, which they're going to need pretty soon in Missoula, or whatever. You know, so that's the curmudgeonry point of view.
It's a good one. I appreciate that. Thank you. I think it's a great segue to transition into what we all want to see at the site. Whether it's from your organizational perspective or whether it's from your personal perspective, I'd love for everyone to share with each other kind of what they want to see. And you can add timeline to that if you want to, or we could do that separately.
I'm going to start. And I'm going to tell you why. So I was one of the founders of the Missoula Marathon. That starts right out here in front of the bank. And I can't begin to tell you how embarrassed I am that 2,500 people from 50 states, 9 different countries run by that mess. I want nothing more to be part of them to come back and see it cleaned up and say, wow, I remember when that looked like Armageddon. And I want to be able to say that I was part of that. And it really means a lot to me. It hurts terribly bad when I run or bike by there to continue to see the mess and to know what is underneath there and to be hung up on a process that's archaic and is argumentative and takes up so much time. And sometimes it's exhausting, the back and forth. And I know in my heart that it's contaminated. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a scientific background, but how can it not be? But it's difficult to be on that site and to look at the river and see how beautiful the river is and look along the part and see the mountain and the river through there and think of what's in front of it. So to me, I know it takes time and I've been here slugging for a long time. I'm not going away because I want people to come and I might not be running with them at that time, but I'm damn well be cheering them on.
We'll get someone to push you. You got
An example of the frustrations I'm in Frederick down here, we had a well pump that failed on a Saturday evening. And so I got 28 residents there without water. So I said, so we got it fixed by Sunday night. And we turned in an emergency request to the people that are in charge of the water. And took us 1.5 years and $5,000 in penalties to get it mitigated. Because we didn't follow their procedures. What are we supposed to do on a Saturday? You're not there. We should contact first thing Monday morning before you did anything. No. What did I do with my residents without water for 48 hours because they aren't open? It's frustrating. And when it's all said and done, they say, "Why you people did an excellent job." Frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, we generally, Missoula County speaking, from all the commissioner letters and places that we've gone, have stated in a multitude of ways that we'd like to see the dumps cleaned up, the berms removed, the floodplain restored, and the property returned to full use within the community to be a cornerstone again of the local economy. And what we'd really appreciate is for the cost burden or the work for that to occur to be on the backs of the responsible parties. And so that's where our involvement in the process is to achieve that means.
Excellent. Others? I'm gonna call on people then. Chris or Brian, you want to speak up to and result outcomes here? And then Jen, I see your hand. Brian unmuted. We'll go Brian then Jen.
So from the natural resource damage perspective, and I hope I'm not over speaking for the rest of the trustees, we don't want a job. We don't want a job at the Smurfit site. We want to see, and we have consistently pushed for better remedies so we didn't have to get that residual to baseline, the injuries to the resource back to the baseline condition. There's nothing we can do. We can collect damages for the injuries that have already occurred, but we would like to see a risk-based cleanup that gets as close to baseline condition under the rules of Superfund as possible.
Let's go.
Yes.
Let's go, Jen. Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate that, how you articulated that. The mill, the Smurfit-Stone Champion Horner Waldorf mill has impacted my life since I was about 5. And I would love at the end of this process to see a fully restored floodplain, that we intentionally work to also restore the river to support sensitive species that have been lost to the impacts of the mill processes. And I would love to just let some of that area rest and rehab itself.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate that. Chris.
From my perspective, and the tribes, I suspect, is the same. I lost my train of thought. The resource that we're all working with for the tribes and everybody is the river and the fish. And lost my train of thought again. Sorry about that. What we can offer by being the process, and this is a good point. Someone mentioned the process gets in the way, and it does, is that the level of transparency that I've noted here in these Superfund sites in Montana is, shall we say, not very transparent. I am not allowed on site to do what I need to do to speed this process up. And this goes with all the Superfund sites I'm going to. And data that gets thrown away because somebody objects to it. If that's the PRPs, that's the way life is sometimes. But throwing away data and not allowing the trustees of all people to come look at these sites, that's just really off the charts, unacceptable. I mean, it's the opposite of transparency. It implies you're hiding something. And so that's got to stop. That really has to stop. And I will be, and I wanted to touch on one other, you guys were talking about why this site visit happened. You might want to find out who the owner is and how close he graduated from high school from Zinke.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that perspective. Can you speak a little bit to the question that we were all speaking to on what the tribes would like to see at the site? I'm sure it's very similar, and I've heard you say this before, but I want you to talk a little bit about like the ideal outcome there beyond the needs of transparency and access at the moment.
Well, these paper plants are well known for what they produce, really well known. And when I met with the National Superfund tribal group about 2 weeks ago, it's apparent to me why they want to decouple the source from the problem. And because in some places like New York, Wisconsin, Michigan, they've had to clean up tens of miles, dig it up, a river. And that's the consequences of just pretending that it's not real. And that's where I'm saying transparency will go a long ways. It's your dioxin interference question. We know they come from there. We have documents that show where they went. We have that. But at present, that's off the table. And that's just not acceptable from the tribe's perspective. If it's data, okay, tell us why it's no good. Don't just pretend that you've made a document that never existed, that it didn't happen. This has got to stop. And that's where the tribes are at, is we need to go forward, and we're willing to work with anybody, everybody. But data is data. And I'm looking at Sam going, yeah, data is data, baby. Let's use it. As well as, so we just need to move forward and put all the cards on the table, not just some of them, not the pretty ones. You got to put the ugly on the table.
Yeah, and I think just one more thing that I think is key to keep in mind is that over the course of the mill's life, a number of environmental regulations or just straight regulations came into play, and that altered the way in which the plant operated, which the mill operated, whether it was where they were storing their asbestos or their dumps in groundwater or operating a bleaching plant. And so as the land goes into a new use, as it is considered to be remediated or restored, a lot more we're asking for is just that the land is brought up to current standards, regulations, and expectations before it enters its next phase of life. And so that's something that I think is often, a big issue for the community. How does this site, because it's a Superfund, sidestep these rules and regulations that us as individual people are required to adhere to? And so I think that's a lot of what the community would like to bring to the table.
100%.
Yes. I'll just add, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks are the stewards of Montana's fish and wildlife resources for Montanans now and to the future. And I see this site as having so much potential and so much opportunity. And what I mean by that is, it comprises a huge portion of the floodplain, like Jen said, that's been disconnected from the river. And the river and its floodplain, its cottonwood galleries, is such incredible habitat for fish and wildlife and the people that use those things. And the value to the community of miles of river here in proximity to Frenchtown, Missoula, is only going to become more valuable as time goes on. And the legacy of this site could be one of restoration and of value to the community, its residents. And I hope that cleanup is done in such a thorough enough way that it doesn't preclude future uses, like Elena said. But this is an opportunity we don't see very often, and certainly not at this scale on one of the most important rivers in western Montana.
So you are gonna push me?
Absolutely.
And we're gonna high five.
I appreciate it.
And Elena will have to follow everyone.
TQ, you want to weigh in at all? Or Bruce, you go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I don't have anything different to add. I think all on the same page of wanting it to be, the remedy to be protective of human health and the environment, to make sure that we're like looking at the data in a thoughtful, critical way to make sure it is supporting our remedy. I think that's kind of the role that we've been playing most, is just looking at the data and making sure it is supporting what is in our risk assessments and how it can support what we pick for our remedy going forward.
I guess I have two things to say, both of which are, common themes among the group here. Firstly, I want to have confidence that that the data are sufficient, that they're being interpreted reasonably and correctly. I'd like to be able to face the community in an undisclosed amount of time and say, we're confident that the site is adequately characterized and we're confident in the remedy. And I mean, I'm not the one implementing the remedy, I'm not the one setting the standards, but as an independent scientist involved in the process, that's the standard I want to achieve. And yeah, it can be iterative, it can be slow to get all the way there. And I would also say I agree with Chris. I think there's a lot of information that we can bring to the table that can help us to understand what's going on, and I'd like to see all that included in the process. So for the future of the site, I'd like to see it be a net benefit for the river, actually a positive part of the river ecosystem. There are not many sections of large floodplain along the lower Clark Fork River. Fundamentally, just in terms of the shape of the valley, there aren't very many. And the few that exist, mostly are cities and towns. So this is perhaps a singular opportunity on this river to actually restore that sort of ecological function that has been generally lost across the continental United States. So yeah, I'd like to see a net ecological positive, and I'd truly like to have confidence that we understand the site well enough that we can trust the remedy.
Could you tell?
Well, yeah, but who owns it?
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a great
I
question.
see people standing in the wings that want to put in 5,000 houses
Yeah.
and sell the water to California.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't own it.
Yeah, none of us do. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point that's always bothered me. Everyone speaks of mitigation. We have this process which is torturous and partly imaginary, unfortunately. But when push comes to shove, somebody's going to own it. If it's not the public, so to speak, right? If it's not a park of some kind, it's going to be loaded with houses. That's the future of Missoula's area.
Well,
and it's unfortunate for most of us who now live here to think about it. But I grew up in Southern California. I know what's going to happen. I've been preaching what's going to happen for the last 20 years. It's going to be little LA unless it's done right, unless somebody else owns it.
You raise a great point. I would also observe that a large part of the site is mapped as floodplain by the Corps of Engineers. And so that doesn't mean that I get to decide what we do with it, right? I still don't own it, but it does mean you can't build compost there.
You can change the floodplain, which is what they're in the process of doing right now. It changes about once every 10 years or less. I think the floodplains in the county changed at least once, changes in the floodplain. Well, that's good. But
I put down on my list of needs, we just need it on the site.
I was,
No, this is totally off the table, to
it's
be honest with
it's
you.
not gonna be up to us. It's gonna be whatever economics going on.
But it doesn't have to be an absolute, all or nothing.
Correct.
I taking your point, which, yeah. Which is, even though it's not.
Of course, I understand that. And it would be lovely if it could be kept in that kind of reasonable sized parcel developments. I don't think that's gonna happen, but then there you are. I have no idea what's gonna happen. It's hard to say. I do know that when M2 Green first came to the community, because they're mop-up outfit or Smurfit, right? Cheesy mop-up outfit, and we knew they were lying. And at the same time, some parcels have been sold off that were safe because they were high and not used. But I just being curmudgeonly, which is my job. You got to face the reality that at the end of the process, which is going to take another 10 years, as far as I can tell, the whole complex of the valley and everything in it is going to be changed. Better or worse, I have no idea whatsoever. But the process is so long and so torturous. Even if you have a clear idea of what you want at the end of it, the circumstances will change completely by the time, before you can get there. So it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a time problem.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you. You're also providing a really good segue to me today, curmudgeon or not. I'm gonna let,
All right.
I'm conscious of time, so it's 7:14, we're gonna end at 7:30, no matter what, and so.
All I was gonna say was that the long and tenuous process isn't necessarily the way it has to be.
Yeah.
It's just the way it's operating at the site. Should the current landowners and potentially responsible parties wanna work hand in hand with the EPA and the community,
Never happened.
I'm just pointing out what
Right.
could potentially be a fork in the road for this hopeful, forward-looking scenario
Yep.
as we continue to invite them to the table to answer our questions.
But the aptly named perps are never gonna let you get away with it.
Thanks, Glenn. Last comment on this one, then we're moving on.
The problem that I have is follow the money. Because I've watched regulations change as the money flowed in. And if you look at that parcel of property, there's a considerable amount of potable water that's available. There's a certain effluent potential that's available that could be really utilized for development. And that's what is concerned, all the money.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of development potential there, which is, I think, in the context of the spirit of something we agree upon, we all agree that we don't own this. We all agree that there is development potential at some level, but there is a lot of things, I don't want to say surprisingly, but there's a lot of things that we just went over that we do agree on for the outcome and why everybody's at the table here together. And it really feels good actually to get that all out there and to hear everybody's perspective and know that within this table which we're sitting, there's not a lot of disagreement about how to move forward, about what to move forward. The question now is kind of how to move forward. And one of the things I want to bring to the group from the Zinke tour, it's going to go down in history as the Zinke tour. right, I'm sorry. As that, you were there. And from the tour was that EPA was prepared, very, very prepared, to just clearly say that we're moving on. We're moving to the remedial investigation, and there's really, we're going to FS, excuse me, we're gonna finalize the remedial investigation and publish, and move to, excuse me, the next phase, which is the feasibility study. And there's really, that's it. Like that, at the end of the day, that was the message received very clearly. And so that opens up where we might start diverging as a group in a couple ways. You know, for me, and maybe I can speak on behalf of CFC, you can speak on that as well, is like, I don't see a whole lot of reason to fight that at this stage. I think it's time for us to use the public participation and KEG relationship opportunities that come with moving to a published remedial investigation, excuse me, and moving to the feasibility study to do as much as pushing towards what we agree on as we can. But I might be wrong about that assumption to the group, and that's the last thing I want to do in these last 15 minutes is what do we need to do next? On my sheet, I have the KEG, this group here needs to, or wants to, it's not just a need, it's a want to, increase communication with the community, change the channels of communication, invest with partners in different ways to reach people with different messages. That's great. Strategize on how the KEG is most effective logistically, whether it's meeting here, maybe meeting upstream sometime, maybe meeting downstream sometime. Maybe we can cut down on the number of meetings, maybe certain meetings are more strategic, maybe there's work groups, who knows? But there's some logistics things to talk about. There was a great point about consistency in presentation, actual versus perceived. I really like that idea. Chris brought up access and transparency. These are the things we need. These are not unreasonable asks, both of us and of the agency and the PRPs. So these are all really great things, but I want to also open the floor up to like, what does this group need to do next? There's a shift upon, right? There's a shift. We're moving in this process a little bit. Do we want to dive into the bunker and fight like hell to get more data? Or Sam, do you want to talk about the data dump at all? We have data.
We have a lot. I just want to say that in my view, the more specific we can be with our questions and concerns, the more likely it is that we can try to use the data that is a part of the RI, which right now, it is what it is right now. We can try to use that to answer those questions. The possible answers being like an affirmative answer, a negative answer, or there's not enough data to answer the question. And so, well, I am concerned, let me say, well, I'm skeptical that the data set is sufficient to adequately characterize the site. I think the more specific we can be about our concerns, the better equipped we are to, actually identify limitations in the data set. So I guess, yeah.
So I've got a question. Have you seen the 30 questions, specific questions that Elena put together and submitted?
That wasn't me. I didn't ask any of those questions, just to be clear. I just want to make sure that everybody in the room knows that. Because the questions that the KEG submitted to, I submitted those. Yeah, okay. I think it's great. I think it's a great question. I just want to be incredibly clear that absolutely none of those questions came from me.
No, they came from the KEG.
Yeah.
And it was a mix of, Sam had contributed some, and Brian and I had talked about them. I went through notes. I went through 9 years of notes. I went through 8 interviews that Peter Nielsen did with former Smurfit-Stone mill workers to come up with those 10 questions that we wanted to be presented. In hindsight, should have waited because the data wasn't gone through, and it was a premature ask on my part to have David present. It was really premature, lesson learned. It was.
You might have got the same answers.
Maybe it was good. I don't know. I mean, I would like to have seen more concrete answers, and he wasn't in a position to give those concrete answers.
Bunny, I think I feel emotion in your voice, so I want to address that. I think what Sam, if I could rephrase that, was now that we have a data set and we're organizing it and we can see it's asking questions of the data set that are kind of driven by what we have. Not that we didn't have good questions before or there weren't good questions, but okay, now we see what kind of data we have, what kind of data we don't have, what are the holes, what's this, what's this, what's this, asking very specific questions of the data set.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. I'm going to go to Elena first and then I'll come over here.
Yeah, and so what I will say is that we have had many specific questions over the years, of which a wide array of groups were asking, and that's what drove the additional sampling. And that was on the basis and the concurrence of all parties that were participating in the KEG. And unfortunately, there was some noise in that discussion, and our opportunity to fully get all of that, has passed. And so we are moving on to the FS, and I don't think we can actually, they have clearly stated that there is no space to do anything otherwise. So I don't think that conversation is necessarily fruitful.
Right, the difference is that now we have the full RI data set, that is significant, because now if the answer to one of the questions is that the data is not sufficient, that's a very different answer than a year ago when more data collection was maybe on the table.
I also think it's important to note that a lot of these questions will be answered in the RI. Like, that is the point of the RI, is it compiles all the data from the past 10 years and looks at the whole site characterization where we have problems. So I think.
Sorry, what's the RI?
The remedial investigation.
Okay, so that's what we've just gone through for 10 years?
But it's not published yet.
Yeah, it hasn't,
but
it's
it
in
is
the
coming?
process of being written.
2026.
Yeah, that's where they're taking all of the data, compiling it into a report to say, this is where our concerns are, this is what the data is showing. So in my mind, it feels a little premature to start digging into the data until we know where there might be disagreements. I think it's helpful to have the RI report out there so we're all looking at the same data set, and then if we have disagreements at that point, we can start looking at what might be needed in the next step of that.
Jen has her.
I'm going to go to Jen.
But
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say what would be trust building and to build collaboratively forward were if the questions that Bunny pointed out and that we've asked in a number of our letters were actually answered. Because those are, yeah, and were specifically in response so that it was transparent instead of discussing about how it could be addressed later in the process.
Yeah, and I think that has been a real struggle is we have the data where we could answer these questions, but they haven't been answered yet. And we're in this weird middle ground of waiting to put all the pieces together.
I'm going to go to Jen and then Chris, and then we'll come back to the room.
Thank you. I guess I want to ask about this process and how is the RI being written when we have been told that the data hasn't been analyzed? I just feel like there are conclusions being jumped to because we've received the data, but not the how it all works together and what it's telling us. And we were told that wasn't going to be released for a few months. I guess I'm wondering how then can you make conclusions in an RI report that would then inform the feasibility study?
I guess I can chime in. So we have gotten data summary reports. So from each of the sampling events that happened, they get summarized in these reports, which the agencies, EPA and DEQ, get to review. And then those become public. So the last 2 sampling events that happened last year, we're currently reviewing those data summary reports. So hopefully those will get finalized in the next month or 2, and then those will become available to the public. We can present on that data. And then the next step is to compile the data from all of those data summary reports into the RI. And that's what the PRPs are writing that, well, GSI is writing that on behalf of the PRPs. And then the agencies get to review that, and then we can present on the findings from the RI.
And the one thing that I think needs to be brought out there too is that the RI is not a door that gets closed on what kind of investigations can happen, right? At the end of the RI, if there are some gaps in the RI, then those can be addressed and brought into the feasibility study. So
Yeah, it's a super important point.
yeah, so it's not, I mean, you can be worried that there are data gaps, but those data gaps can still be addressed in the next phase of things. So
I can speak to that. Sorry to.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was working on data summary reports to date. It's slow. We're also collecting data that is after the official RIN date, which is the end of last year. It's 2025 now, but we're collecting data now that will officially be under the FS umbrella, but it still serves to characterize the site. So it keeps going. The site's huge, and there's a lot of data to collect. So we're always doing it.
Can I ask a process question?
About the RIFS.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask it specifically to DEQ. So Donovan, this is where my question really comes from, is that, so when different agencies, when GSI and Missoula County and FWP and Clarkburg, when everybody looks at that, who is the final authority to say, we're right, and we don't think that there's gaps because of X, Y, and Z?
I mean, EPA does have the final say. We have a consultative role with EPA, so we get to be in the room when we're having these discussions and can bring issues forward, but ultimately they have the say. But I would say so far in the process, like there have been steps where we haven't agreed in some of the interpretation in the data summary reports, and they have been very receptive to our feedback, and we've worked through a lot of those issues. So I think they are receptive to hearing what other people think, and I don't think there's been a point where they're not going to at least listen and try to explain why we might not agree, but they ultimately do have the final say.
Go to Chris. Chris, you've had your hand up for a while.
I do. The record for this, and all I do is read stuff from the history of all these Superfund sites. So I know your history pretty well, and going back before that, from what your documents have and predecessors to that aren't part of your discussion. And so I can point out a long record of, well, we said this, and then later on, as it's reported, and later on, that's not the case. Right? Happens a lot, and it's thousands. We see it all the time. So, to the question of sharing the data and having goofy fellows like me look at it and go, well, shit, that looks wrong. Here's the for us, where's the downside for the public other than their expense and time and et cetera? Where's the downside for that, so that you feel comfortable saying, well, wait till we get done doing this, and then it's better time for you to comment. Because we see these documents not uncommonly put out the door, as Elena's saying, and well, that's the end of that story. So the downside is what I'm really interested in for the public.
Thanks, Chris. Do you want to respond?
Could you maybe repeat? I was having a hard time hearing. I just wanted to very muffled. Yeah.
What's the downside of Sam and I looking at your data and coming up with some ideas before you do?
Yeah. What's the downside of us? Yeah, looking at the data. I think.
Well, I think not so much looking at it, I mean, we have it.
Yeah.
You have everything, yeah, everybody's got, but it's hard to look at, it's a very large data set, yeah. But, you know, trying to analyze it and asking, you know, the questions that Chris or I and other folks in the room come up with.
Can I ask, what's the framework for the data? Okay, there has to be a fundamental model or a fundamental framework to fit the data into. Because we have continuously changed frames or something. It started out, they've said, oh, well, we just need to look that deep because, you know, it's all surface contamination. And somebody else comes and says, well, there was a dump and it's full of 50-gallon oil drums that are full of crap. And eventually they're gonna rust out and that stuff's gonna get into the aquifer. Oh, well, maybe I'll look at some wells. We put some wells, we look at the wells. Why do we look at the wells? I don't know. Then, you know, and it's like Uncle Tom's Cabin, you know, about Eliza. She just growed, okay? The framework keeps slipping. Everybody knows what the real wanted final endpoint is. And Jerry put it quite nicely. We'd like to go by there and not look at a mess. And we'd like to know that it's okay to go out there and play ball, right? Or whatever. So there has to be a framework for this to fit into somehow, isn't there?
There's a reason why EPA has a whole data management department, and there's a reason why, you know, everyone who's involved in working on this data set, you know, is saying it's a slow process, and that's because there are so many dimensions to the data. And you know, all these new questions sort of bring a new dimension.
Well, it's a feedback process.
Right.
I understand.
So a lot of you know, the work that, you know, EPA, DEQ, the consultants, the PRP, and myself are trying to do is to be able to, you know, put the data in a frame that is applicable to answering, you know, those specific questions. And to do that with confidence is not a super easy process.
I want to refocus this because I wanted to end at 7:30 and it's 7:34. It's like,
It's good intentions.
yeah, good intentions always. We'll end by 7:45 for sure, I promise this time. This is a good discussion, and one of the things I should have said at the beginning of this is not a one and done discussion. But I think that the things that we do agree on are really strong, and I think where we're getting to the meat of this is what the KEG does next. Like, what do we do next in this interim? Because as Jen pointed out in her comments, well, what do you mean? We're waiting on these summary data reports, and the summary data reports are going to be compiled, and then eventually at some point, and Ali said, you know, maybe 2026, we get a full RI to look at. That's probably a pretty optimistic estimate.
I think the GSI wants to do it.
Well, it was drafted in 22, so in terms of bulk work of typing words into a page, a lot of that is done, but updating tables takes time and figures, and we moved companies, and so that takes time to move things around. And I'm not one to speak on it in an official role, but
I don't think we're going to get anywhere. I'm going to go to you next. I don't think we're going to get anywhere by the end of this meeting. That's this silver bullet, and we know what we're going to do moving forward, and that's okay. But I would like to hear from people about what they think and feel should be the next step for the KEG, and where you know, we've gotten through a lot of what we agree on. We know where EPA is headed the next phase of the process. We know what's available and who's looking at the data right now. We know that EPA is coming in to look at this other part about PCBs on the river. There's things moving. What you see as our role moving forward, and we'll continue this conversation. I've been sitting on you for a long time. I apologize.
It's no problem. one of the biggest difficulties is human nature. It's called integrity. And you can have data, and then you can have three different people with the same data, come with different conclusions, and they come to a trend. And then in the end, you have to find out what is the perception, what's factual. And the mill has been in operation for about 66 years or something like that. And so the problem didn't happen overnight. We're not gonna solve it overnight, but we need to work at moving forward as efficiently as we can, as effectively as we can, to accomplish the end goal.
Bruce, you haven't said anything you want.
Well, I was just gonna end with a positive thing I did again, that we haven't mentioned. I think it was done, correct me if I'm wrong, but way back when there was an auction of the locomotive and other things in the mill, Don mentioned, well, who should get that money? And it turned out the county got that money because because we highlighted it.
It was back taxes.
Which I think, to be a good county representative, I would state is 40% county, 20% schools, 20% schools.
Yeah.
And it was also because of Representative Kim Dudick at the time lobbying to change the law that said the county could in fact sell that property
Right.
to pay the taxes on.
But I think the first time I heard it
And she's a
mentioned was
Frenchtown
Don.
girl.
Don was the one that
I happened to catch
why did
the
we do
auction.
this?
They were trying to sneak the auction through and I happened to catch it.
I was there.
Anyhow, it's a positive thing.
Thanks, Bruce. Jerry, you want to say anything?
I think just the dialogue is really important and continuing to have dialogue. We want to have this on every single agenda, what we agree on. I think that what we agree on is really important. I think we've heard some of the things that the process is something we don't agree on. But how do we meet in the middle and how do we meet each other where we're at to mitigate the torturous effects of a process?
Well, yeah, I think the CAG's next move is how the heck do we speed the process?
We don't.
Well, we have been impeding the process to some extent. In fact, you can look, and I don't want to pick on any particular thing, but I need an example here. The fish thing expanded from nothing into a major problem, right? There was no consideration at all about the fish when we started out 10 years ago. And I was just, I'm here to help you set up a CAG. You do this. And so it's been a moving target, and that's part of the problem, and it is a feedback process, and I understand it's got a very long low-pass filter around it, so you're in trouble no matter what you do. But there ought to be a way we can really help speed it up. Part of it's in passing information out. People are gonna ignore it, you know that. So somehow we have to just work as a body to try to get things moving faster. Unfortunately, we can't help with a lot of the stuff that EPA has to do because they're stuck with the process. I don't understand that too. So whatever we can do to speed it up is what we need to do. But I don't know what it is.
I appreciate that, honesty.
Okay.
And that. Anybody online Elena, you want to say anything? Anybody online, GQ? Just, I know this isn't a real comfortable way to leave this meeting, but it's the reality, right? The reality is we're not maybe totally sure and we maybe not agree on yet exactly what to do next. But there's a lot of things on this list. Brian?
So I think you guys touched on a lot of really important things tonight. I think one of the hard things going forward is how to keep people involved in this group. There is going to be a long slog through the RI. And I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but when you see the data and you see the RI report, it's not going to be like, aha, that's it now. It's going to be a lot more data that a lot of us won't really understand. I think the important thing to keep focused on is what are we evaluating the full range of cleanup alternatives for the site? And does the data allow us to do that?
Thanks, Brian. Lena?
I've been trying not to talk.
You've been doing a fantastic job.
Go ahead.
Articulating things really well.
No, I mean, I just think this group hasn't been transparent at all. Our issues, our concerns, the specifics that we've been asking for have been laid out and outlined. And, you know, there is more data that we can ask even more specific questions to. And it'd be great to understand how those will actually be answered or not. If you're not going to answer a question, then it'd be great to be direct about it. There's a lot of statements that have been put forward that aren't reflected in the conceptual site model that need to be in the remedial investigation. There's a lot of things that, yes, are very bureaucratic and detailed, but those are the things that will drive the outcome. And so that's why we go into these details and things like that. But maybe we could have details meetings, and maybe we could have less detailed meetings. And so I think the value in this group and the importance in our continued meeting is in part because the strength and outcome depends on the collaborative whole. And so where we found our greatest strength is when we have all been on the same page and we have all come together and we have all had the same voice. That's when we got the resolution through the state legislature, which had a lot of benefit in terms of how we were represented by the state. And I think we can build on that. The cornerstones for this group are here. They're already in place.
I think it goes to a lot of the things that I heard. I think almost everybody said it, but in a different way. There was a keyword called confidence. That was a common thread. Confidence that it's clean up, confidence that you can fish, confident that we're not gonna have somebody's 10 tomato plants die because it's toxic underneath that soil, and having the confidence to move forward. Because there's been trust that's been built and there's information that's been shared and questions answered. And I think that almost every person in this room said it about what we agree on. And it was that having that confidence was a common thread. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Absolutely, in order to move forward, and I think we just said it.
Nice. Okay, I think that's a great place to leave it. Everybody online, thanks for joining. Everybody here and online, thanks for giving me the opportunity to bring that out. I don't know if it was useful or not, but
We'll see you next month.
Time will tell. Time will tell.
And thanks to DQ for bringing an owl. Otherwise, we wouldn't have
Yeah.
any audio or video. Yeah.
Is that generally Brian's job?
It just depends on the week. It's not mine.
Brian, we missed you. We missed you in person, big guy.
And I didn't touch my phone.
I'm Jerry.
I heard it tweet though.
All right, everybody online, we're closed. We're officially closed the meeting at 7:45.